Hi there, I'm Susie Bridges. Welcome to Gallery Teachers Masterclass, and today's session is all about word and sentence stress. Okay, so let's get going with today's session on word and sentence stress. This is what we are planning to cover today. So talking a little bit to define what word stress actually is, discussing how that fits into sentence stress, doing a little bit of work on intonation, of course, talking about some really helpful practical tasks and classroom activities, and then that's going to be followed by the live Q&A. Okay, so why is word stress important? So if we get stress wrong, people can't understand us. So there's a great example by Emma Patare. I carried the batel to the hotel. Ooh, that would sound really weird, wouldn't it, if we weren't pronouncing bottle and hotel correctly. So even though they're really familiar words, if we shift the stress, as native speakers, our brain can't understand batel and hotel. Those words don't make sense to us. So we need to make sure we get the stress right. Same thing if you have a look at those two beautiful pictures. One of my colleagues at ITTC where I work has got a gorgeous garden. And so he was saying that he likes watching the caterpillars crawling on the daffodils in his garden. So again, if we get the stress of those really common words wrong, it's so difficult for us to understand exactly what we mean when actually we're talking about caterpillars with the stress on the first syllable and daffodils, go Wales, with the stress on the first syllable. So this is the reason that word stress is important, because as native speakers, we're attuned to hearing the right stress. And if non-native speakers get it wrong, we simply don't recognize the words that they're trying to say. Okay, so what exactly is word stress? So word stress is where we emphasize a particular sound. And the sound that we're emphasizing is normally a pure vowel sound or a diphthong. So those of you who are familiar with the IPA, the International Phonemic Alphabet, will recognize the diphthongs, the short and long vowel sounds just here. And when we're making those sounds, normally this requires more effort from our mouth, our jaw, and our facial muscles. So we need to do a bit more with our face when we're making appropriate sounds and showing word stress. So it can really support the students if we can model that for them and help them understand the difference between pure vowel sounds or diphthongs and the schwa. That's that little upside down E in the middle, which is the unstressed sound. So a stressed syllable is often going to be preceded and succeeded by unstressed syllables, and a third of unstressed syllables are made up with the schwa sound. So it's going to really support the students in their listening and in their speaking if we can help them to hear the difference between stressed sounds and unstressed sounds, stressed syllables with pure vowel sounds and diphthongs, and unstressed syllables which often will contain the schwa sound. So marking sentence stress, different teachers use different ways. I'm a fan of the spots and circles. I really like this because not only can you see where the stress is, but you can also see how many syllables the word has. So if you think about the word bottle, it has 2 syllables, and I normally support this by showing students using the finger technique that the stress would be on the first one. So bottle, and that's different from hotel. So still 2 syllables, but the stress shifts from bottle to hotel. Same thing with caterpillars. So caterpillars, 4 syllables, you break it down, caterpillars. Again, I think it's really important that you involve the students in this. So you can model the word caterpillars and then ask them, how many syllables do you hear? How many pieces can you hear? And then you can show them that the stress is on the first syllable, caterpillar. And then you can see the mouth opening, so you can model the vowel sound of the a. Same thing with daffodils. Okay, so 3 syllables, the stress on the first, nice round open shape for the mouth, daffodils. Other ways to mark stress, some people just like to underline the first syllable or the syllable where the stress is contained. Others like to just focus on the vowel that's containing the stress. And other people may choose to use boxes or spots or some other form of marking just where the vowel, just where the stress sound sits, remembering that the stressed syllable is always going to be shown over a vowel sound. So as long as you're consistent with the method that you use. Even if learners are with different teachers that use different methods, they'll get to know, oh, Susie likes the spots and circles, but Hetty likes to use the boxes, Gabby likes to use underlining. They'll be absolutely fine with that as long as you're consistent and you stick with the same method and you support and back that up by either involving them when you're writing a new word on the board, asking them where the stress is, and demonstrating using your face, using your mouth, using your jaw, and supporting that by using the finger technique as well. So helping students to see stress and pronunciation is now really easy with pronunciation helps and tips online. So when students are away from you, a lot of opportunities for them to hear how things that you can see just next to the word that I've chosen, which is pronunciation, which you can train your students to recognize. So with the phonemic script, the stressed syllable is shown with what looks like a little apostrophe just before the main stressed syllable. But you can click on the little microphone and you can hear how this is going to sound.
Pronunciation.
So on Google, which is where this is coming from, there's also a little bit more information. So you can get to hear either British pronunciation, or students are studying, they might hear different accents, different voices. So it might be useful for them to hear how the differences are between British and American pronunciation. There may not be too many significant differences in a lot of words, but in some words like adult versus adult, for example, that might be one of the differences. And then in the Learn to Pronounce section, as well as the phonemic script that you get on the previous page, you can also see here that they've broken it down into more kind of intuitive syllables that can be read and understood. And again, you can click the little microphone so you can hear
Pronunciation.
Where the stress is. If you choose, you can also slow this all the way down so the students can really try to focus on recognizing the different syllables. Sometimes students have difficulty differentiating between 3 or 4 or 5 syllable words. So this is a technique that can support and help them with that. And again, clicking on the little speaker or the little microphone, pronunciation slows it all the way down, and you can see in bold the stressed syllable. So just getting the students to recognize how they can support themselves by looking at these different things online can be really useful. Reputable online dictionaries will have some kind of pronunciation tool as well. So this one I've taken from Macmillan. I've just chosen to have a look at the word beginner. Again, you can see the little loudspeaker icon. So this is what the students have to click on. And then it might be, the same or different is from the Oxford Learners Dictionary. And this one is quite nice because not only can you hear the pronunciation, but it also gives them the phonemic script so they can start to become familiar with how vowel sounds look versus how they're pronounced, and also how consonant sounds look versus how they're pronounced. So I wouldn't recommend that you do a whole lesson on the IPA, but I would certainly encourage you to think about introducing students to particular vowel sounds, diphthongs or vowels, because then they become autonomous and they can look at things like this away from the classroom, away from you, and still work on accurate and correct pronunciation, even without a teacher present. So I think it can be a useful tool to help them get to grips with the IPA, supported by things like, microphones or loudspeaker icons where they can hear the pronunciation of the words they're trying to learn. So in the UK, we've got a common stress pattern, which is normally dirda. So 2-syllable words often have stress on the first syllable. So in this sentence, you can see that's true because common, pattern, English all have the same dirda sound. This may change depending on whether you are using a word as a noun or as a verb. And again, it can be useful to point these out to students so they've got a sense of how stress can shift according to the word family or the part of speech. So I've got a couple of examples down here of using record as a noun. So she broke the world record. You can hear the stress lives on that first syllable compared to when it's being used as a verb. So this session is being recorded. I need to have a record of this recorded session. So you can hear if I'm using recorded as an adjective or as a verb, the stress lives in the middle because the verb would be record, different from record. The same thing is also true of produce versus produce, and also research versus research. It can be difficult sometimes to hear the distinction in word stress in natural, rapid native speaker speech. But if you want to support your students to sound a bit more native, a bit more fluent, then helping them to understand that sometimes stress can shift when we're changing the word family can really help them grow in confidence in their own pronunciation. So just mentioning word families there, this is often a cause for massive confusion because stress often shifts around. So here are some examples going across the lines of how we can notice word stress shifting. So if we think about the really common high frequency word decide, so verb, 2 syllables, stress on the second, decide. And then if we're going to turn that into a noun, 3 syllables, where's the stress? You've got it, decision, okay, in the middle. And then if we think about the adjective of somebody who is decisive, so again, the stress will be in the middle there. So not a massive shift there because it goes from decide to decision to decisive. So it often likes to live around the middle. Have a look at the next line, equal. So there we've got the stress of our 2 syllable word on the first part, equal. And then we're going to change the word equality. Now look what happens. It's not equality. Now we've gone across to equality. Making sure I had my 4th syllable there. And then we've got the verb equalize. So the stress is shifting from equal to equality and then back to equalize. So that can be a little bit confusing for learners. There's the common example that I'm sure lots of TEFL teachers know and use of photograph versus the name of the person who does that for a job. So now we're thinking about a photographer. And then if we think about the method of study or the name of the study, photography. So again, shifting stress according to whether it's a person noun or a proper noun or a noun or a verb or an adjective. Same thing for psychology, psychologist, psychological. There, the stress is exactly the same. So the students might be trying to think about, oh, okay, I've got to watch out for a shifting stress pattern there. And then a word comes along where actually the stress sits at exactly the same place compared to transport versus transported and transportation. So when you're teaching new words, it's a really good idea to think about word families and just support the students if it is a word that contains example of shifting stress according to if it changes a different part of speech. Something I quite like to do with my learners when I'm teaching stress, and I'm still trying to figure this out on Zoom, is a little bit of standing stress or Mexican wave formation. So in order to make stress memorable, I've used the lovely ex-Prime Minister of the UK, Theresa May, giving it large with the Mexican wave there, because I think that kinesthetic movements, body movements, can help the learning sink in. So let's imagine we've got Theresa May demonstrating stress. So we can use this as an example to help get our students to do a Mexican wave, or if it was in a physical room, I would get them to do it standing up. On Zoom, it's much more tricky because how the students appear in my Zoom windows might be a different order from how the students appear in their own windows. So trying to get individual students to act as individual syllables, which I would normally do in a physical classroom, is much more challenging on Zoom. But you can certainly give them an opportunity to all have a go at like doing a Mexican wave or doing a standing up movement when they can hear the stressed syllable of a word. So let's imagine we've got a number of different words, okay? So let's take reply. So 2 syllables and the stress on the first or the second, reply. So hopefully you hear it on the second. So if I was trying to use this picture to show a lady and show that Theresa is standing up because the stress is on the second syllable, you can model a word and you can have them do a little Mexican wave, and then you can try and get them to say the word and again support that with standing up or a Mexican wave. Again, this takes a little bit of time and practice because over Zoom there may be like millisecond delays, so it's more challenging to get an actual chorus than it is if you were in a classroom where you can more easily control how and when students are speaking. So if we keep Theresa May as our stressed syllable, but this time the word I want to focus on is tomorrow. So now I need to choose 3 people and make sure that Teresa is in the middle. So I can't choose this lady and this guy and this lady, because that wouldn't show me tomorrow. So I'd have to choose this guy and then Teresa, and then maybe like, this other happy wavy guy here, but make it clear to the students that there isn't a second stress in tomorrow. Okay. Same thing with employee. So thinking about the number of syllables first, employee, and then noticing that the students have to put the stress on the last syllable. So now I'd be going back to my lady in the glasses, guy in the middle, and then Teresa at the end, showing the stress employee, and then have your students join in. And then thinking about how that's different, because if I'm the employee, what's another name I call my boss? Yeah, employer. So now the stress is different. So noticing those differences and just dropping them into your teaching can really support the students and make them aware of when the stress is shifting, particularly with high frequency words. And then standing stress or Mexican wave stress is always fun with 4-syllable or even longer words. So you've got a nice long one, intonation. And you can make it quite sing-songy, quite silly, quite fun. And again, give the students time to join in. So we'd be saying it together, intonation. So doing our little Mexican wave and then going right across the row of intonation. So this is quite a fun thing to try, that if you're in a physical classroom, you can give each person a syllable and only have the stressed syllable stand up or give a Mexican wave. Or on Zoom, all of you say the word and then stand up or do the Mexican wave when you hear the stressed syllable. So that can be just a nice, interactive, memorable, kinesthetic way of helping students see, hear, and experience word stress. It also, I think, supports students if you give them little activities on word families and shifting stress when you're teaching. Several course books tend to do this. So you'll often find, common noun endings like ment, for example, or if you're looking at jobs like ist, biologist, psychologist, this kind of thing. So as is always the way in English, I never like to use the word always or never, because chances are you'll find, a number of exceptions, but we can encourage them to think about patterns, if not exactly rules. Okay, and it can support students if you can help them to group words together so they can hear and they can see the patterns. And that can help you as well when you're doing pronunciation, because you can control it when the pattern is fairly similar. So we've got inform, informative, information, transform, transformative, transformation. So when you've got that ation noun ending, it's very likely that the stress will be on the penultimate syllable, so the last but one syllable. So we can teach students that as a pattern, ation will normally have the stress on the A sound. Okay, depending on what comes before, there may also be an initial stress as well. So in our longer words down here, we've got classification, identification. So there may also be another stress earlier in the word. So here we've got the example classification. So you can hear there's a stress on the first syllable, and the same for identification. You can also hear the stress on the second syllable. So helping the students to recognize word families, patterns, shifting stress is an important part of integrating pronunciation into your ordinary everyday teaching. Okay, so moving away from word stress and thinking more about sentence stress and intonation as well. So in the UK, most people who speak English use it as a stress-timed language. So that means that not every syllable has equal weight. So that's different from other languages, maybe like Spanish or Portuguese, where what you see is what you say, and each syllable gets equal weight. In the UK, we don't work like that. Some syllables are extended and some syllables are squashed. So we need to help students to hear and to see that when we're teaching. So showing stress is really important, not just in words, but also in sentences. And again, knowing the content words of sentences is going to support students in their listening, because even if they miss some of the smooshed up words or the unstressed words, it's not going to matter so much, because if they're trained to pick out the stressed words or the stronger words, these are normally content words and they can get an understanding of what the person is saying, even without knowing every single word that was said. So using natural contractions is really important as well. If I think about the present continuous, I am going to, a native speaker is not going to say that. That's not what students are going to hear when they're out on the street. So teaching students to recognize I'm gonna, You know, if a student is expecting to hear, I am going to, and actually what they experience is, I'm gonna, that's a very different ball game, very different kettle of fish. So even if they can't exactly reproduce I'm gonna, at least they can recognize it. So they're able to, you know, participate in conversations in a bit more of a natural way versus sounding quite stilted if they're pronouncing, I am going to see a movie later. I'm going to see a movie later. And again, thinking about sentence stress, if all you hear is see and movie and later, you can figure out what the person is trying to tell you because everything else is squashed together. So noticing content words, highlighting content words, helping students with contractions and unstressed words is a really important part of their listening and of their production. So we can do this with chunking. So exactly as I'm talking about, not teaching I am going to as 4 separate words, but teaching it more as a chunk, which sounds like I'm gonna. So I'm gonna see a movie. And what we can do when we're doing some pronunciation work is maybe keep that chunk the same and then do a little bit of work on substitution drilling to give them lots and lots of practice of saying the target language a number of times, but changing the end of the sentence so there's enough variety to keep them interested. Okay, so we could have a number of different activities. Okay, imagine if we were teaching, I'm going to talk about future plans and arrangements. So helping them with the target language of I'm gonna, and then we would offer them the prompts of see a movie, eat a pizza, go for a drink, and then have them use the target language and then substitute in the different options. So they've got opportunities to practice using target language. So I'm going to see a movie later. I'm going to have a pizza later. I'm going to go to a movie. So the I'm going to chunk stays the same, but we can substitute different things, giving them lots and lots of practice of natural sounding language, of chunks, contractions, and so on. So we also want to teach students about intonation. The way we say things is sometimes as important or even more important than what we're saying. And depending on where the students come from, they may come from a language which is fairly monosyllabic. English has quite a lot of range, quite a lot of intonation. Intonation is important to us. Other languages may have a more static intonation. So teaching intonation when we're looking at sentence stress, word stress, and chunking is also a really important part of supporting students with their listening and understanding and with their speaking. So there's a couple of activities to have a look at just to show what I mean when I'm talking about emphasis and stress. So the amazing Mark Hancock's Pronunciation Games book has been pilfered unashamedly for this session. Loads of great activities in it. And this one works on contrastative stress. So helping students with emphasis. So we basically want to tell somebody they're wrong, but maybe without saying, actually, you're wrong. Or we can correct them and we can use stress and intonation to show which bit they've got wrong. So if I said, for example, the Greeks built the pyramids, hopefully your general knowledge is so fantastic that you're fully aware that it's not the Greeks that built the pyramids. So you might reflect back to me and say, no, the Egyptians built the pyramids. To be placing more stress on the important word to contrast the fact that I got it wrong and you're now making me get it right. Okay, so same thing with the Atlantic is the world's biggest ocean. If I'm quite sure in my declaration, you might need to repeat back to me the sentence, but emphasize the correction. The Pacific is the world's biggest ocean. So that can be something that you do as a group to model before you put the students into breakout rooms to let them have a go at correcting each other for some other sentences. Okay, what you might want to do is maybe get them to underline the word they think is wrong and obviously make sure that they know what the right answer is before you go off into breakout rooms. Sometimes you might think the students have got great general knowledge, but I found that sometimes with activities like this, people are like, yeah, the Atlantic is the world's biggest ocean. So again, we can use stress there, emphasizing is to show that we're agreeing. So lots of different ways that we can use emphasis to show contrast. How intonation can affect meaning in a sentence. So here's an example of a conversation where the barman is basically going to utter the same statement, but the stress and intonation is going to change according to what the customer gives him. So I would start our conversation if I was in a bar, evening, and then the customer makes the request, evening, can I have a gin and tonic with ice and lemon, please? So this is the statement the barman's going to reproduce. Sorry, sir, I don't have any ice. Okay, so the customer statement, can I have a gin and tonic with ice and lemon, please? I need to show you which word is strong by telling you I don't have any ice. So there's no problem with the gin or the tonic or the lemon, but I repeat back, I don't have any ice. And the ice is the strong part to show you that's where the meaning is. Okay, customer goes, no problem. There's an ice bucket right there. Don't need much, just 1 cube is going to be fine. This time, look at the barman's utterance. So our stress is shifting, our intonation is shifting. Sorry, sir, I don't have any ice. So now I want to emphasize the fact that even though there's an ice bucket, it's completely empty. Okay, so any is the word that's going to be stressed in that utterance. Okay, we've got a very persistent customer who's desperate for a bit of ice. So I'm sure you've got some downstairs. There must be more in the ice machine. So this time, the barman obviously needs to stress the fact that I don't have any ice. So it's the negative aspect of the sentence that contains the strongest intonation, that contains the meaning in that particular response to the customer's request. And then the customer goes a bit crazy, clearly is desperate for a gin and tonic after a hard day at school. But every bar in the country serves ice. So of course, the barman's utterance is going to be, sorry, sir, I don't have any ice. So this is to show you that the utterance remains exactly the same, but the intonation and the stress of how you say it and what you're stressing can completely affect the meaning. So these kinds of activities can be quite fun with your students. Yeah, they can have a little play with that. So there's an activity taken from pronunciation pairworks game, again, Mark Hancock, where the students can practice shifting the stress according to a statement or a response. So we've got the statements down here. So if the statement was, I hate the Beatles, we can't say that in a monotone. If the response question is, who do you like? So if the response question is, who do you like? Think about which word needs to be stressed in that utterance. And hopefully you agree with me that it should be, I hate the Beatles. Oh, okay, so if you hate the Beatles, who do you like? Yeah, that's where our stress goes. So the second statement, again, we can't say, my mum likes the Beatles. If we look at the response question, then that should give us the information, my mum likes the Beatles. Okay, great, but who do you like? So stressing the fact that that's very interesting, but I'm more, concerned about you. I don't like the Beatles. So who do you like? And I like one band especially. Who do you like? So this is, again, another activity that the students can have a little play with, have some fun with. And of course, they can update it. So One Direction, the Beatles, or whoever is currently in with the kids these days. So another one of Mark Hancock's amazing activities that you can use in the classroom are stress mazes. So stress mazes can help support students to hear word stress. So the one on the left, if you look down the bottom, you can see 3 little spots with the bigger one on the first syllable. So that's telling the students that in order to escape out of the maze, they have to follow the stress pattern, da, da, da. So our first word, it's difficult to see, but it's hamburger. So hamburger is the diagonal, they can move horizontally or vertically, but in this case, obviously that doesn't work because it's 2 syllables. And underneath we've got Saturday. So this is training students to recognize where the stress is in a word and also identifying how many syllables a word has, whether it's 2 or whether it's 3. Okay, this one on the right is a little bit different. They're all 2-syllable words, but the stress is going to shift from da-da to da-da. And again, helping the students recognize how they get from top to bottom following a particular stress pattern. So those can be quite fun for the students to have a go at. Another classroom activity is with sentence stress. So we're still using spots and circles because the students are familiar with that, and showing this idea of the content words, so the words that are stressed or the words that are louder versus the unstressed words, which tends to be things like, prepositions, in, at, of, they tend to get squashed really small. Little words like the, it's very unlikely that we're going to stress the activity. So getting the students to say the word say the sentence rather, sorry, and look at the stress pattern. And then this one you can see is a matching activity. So first of all, helping the students recognize the content of the sentence and whereabouts the stress is. And then it's a domino activity. So putting the two sides of the dominoes together until they've used up all of their particular utterances. So this is an example of stress dialogues. So sticking to the same sentence and saying to the students, okay, you've got to use that exact sentence. Doesn't matter what question I ask you, stick to the same sentence and then change your stress according to the question I ask you. So the example, Simon bought 12 pink roses for his wife, is exactly what you have to say. So this might be a little bit unnatural because how many did he buy? You'd be more inclined to go 12. But if I instruct you to give me the utterance back, then you know that the word that needs to be stressed is Simon bought 12 pink roses for his wife. Who bought them? Simon bought 12 pink roses for his wife. So just playing with stress in different ways and allowing the students to have a little bit of fun with various stress dialogues. They can also be encouraged to write their own if you're working with a particularly creative bunch of teenagers or different kinds of people. So all of the activities that I've used in this session are down here in the today's resources section. So you'll be able to have access to that and go off and have a bit of explore on the internet. There's a couple of interesting blogs or articles that you could read about as well, talking about word stress and sentence stress. But I would encourage you to think about stress as you're teaching, think about chunking as you go, and support your students with lots and lots of practice of using stress in natural sentences and dialogues. Can you explain a bit more about word and sentence stress? Absolutely. Word stress is really important because if we get it wrong, it's really difficult for native speakers to understand us. Our brains are attuned to expect to hear words in a particular way and to hear syllables stressed in a particular order. And if they're stressed in the wrong order or not stressed in the way that we're expecting, it can be very difficult for our brain to translate that information. So word stress is really important. And sentence stress is important because a lot of students worry all the time about missing a lot of content in their listening skills. So we can teach students that if they can pick up the content words or the stressed words in an utterance, it doesn't matter if they miss 50% of what the person is saying, because they'll still be able to understand what's being said just from those key words that are stressed in a sentence. So I think that building students' confidence, not just with production, but also with reception, is a really key part of teaching and dealing with word and sentence stress. Do learners need to know technical terms like elision and assimilation? That is a brilliant question. My feeling is absolutely not. I use much more technical terms like smushing and crushing because I think that's more relatable for the students. I'm also a CELTA trainer, so we do use words like elision and assimilation on CELTA courses, but I tell my CELTA candidates that you don't have to pass that terminology down to your learners. Okay, you can teach them about squashed sounds, you can teach them about missing sounds, you can teach them about changing sounds, but I personally don't feel it's necessary to teach the technical jargon like elision and assimilation. That's my thinking.